Okay, well, everybody, thank you for joining us again today for this edition of the Moral Injury Support Network for Servicewomen podcast. I'm your co-host, Jamie Peer. I'm a U.S. Army veteran, having served for 23 years, and I am joined by my co-host, Dr. Daniel Roberts, who is also Command Sergeant Major in the Army Reserves. He's the president and founder of the Moral Injury Support Network for Servicewomen. And today we are very excited. We have the privilege of introducing a truly remarkable guest, Annette Hill. Annette is a licensed professional counselor, nationally certified, and an EMDR certified therapist. With her private practice based in Scottsdale, Arizona, Annette brings a wealth of experience and expertise in the field of mental health and personal growth. Annette's journey in serving others began with her work as a coordinator of the Lifebook program with the Arizona's Children Association, where she worked with children in the foster care system. Later, as a therapist at Devereaux in Arizona, she continued to support children in foster care, and her experiences led her to create a comprehensive curriculum called The Journey of Me. This curriculum has empowered foster care agencies to establish and sustain their own Lifebook programs. With a background of 10 years as a dual diagnosis therapist in residential treatment settings, including the Meadows, and 8 years with the Sundance Center, Annette has honed her skills in assisting individuals with various diagnoses. However, her specialization lies in trauma treatment, where she has made a profound impact on the lives of her clients. Annette's dedication extends beyond her private practice. She passionately supports veterans through her work with Operation Freedom Bird, a nonprofit program that she has been involved with for over 27 years. As a volunteer therapist and board member, she provides invaluable support to combat veterans, offering healing and guidance during their annual 4-day healing journey to Washington, D.C. over the Veterans Day holiday. In addition to her remarkable work, Annette is a Gold Star mother. Her son, Adam Hill Gibson, served 2 tours in Iraq before tragically succumbing to symptoms of PTSD in 2009. Annette's personal experience further fuels her commitment to supporting servicewomen, servicemen, veterans, and their families. We are deeply honored to have Annette join us on this episode today, and her extensive experience, compassionate approach, and personal journey make her an invaluable resource in our collective healing process. So we would love to warmly welcome you today, Annette. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Annette. Thanks for coming on from sunny Scottsdale, Arizona. But we're very proud to have you. We're looking forward to having you at the conference in September as a keynote speaker. But it's just what I know about your work. I'm very fascinated with the work you're doing with our special operators and many of our other veterans. And that I know from personal experience of one veteran, how you really transformed the way she thought about her experiences into very much a healing space. So thanks for coming, and I'm eager to speak to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I am speaking to you from 105 degrees, so I've come very prepared. I may run downstairs and get more water. Yeah, it's getting a little sporty here. I shouldn't complain because I know you all are speaking from high humidity, so I'll stop whining. But I do have AC blowing everywhere. There are fans going, so if you hear background noise, that's what it is. But I appreciate your having me with you today. I'm so looking forward to joining your conference, and I've read through the documentation, the books from your previous conferences. I am enjoying just the planning committees. The whole thing is so enriching in every which way, and I believe that the research that you guys are continually putting together and adding to the body of knowledge of this particular subject is going to make a difference in the lives of so many. As part of my you read some stuff there, and it's funny because I can hear things have already changed and whatever, but I I have also was the original clinical director, and I stood up a program in Bandera, Texas for veterans and first responders. It's a residential treatment center, Warriors Heart, and it is exclusively for this population. And as part of that treatment, we are utilizing some of the things we're going to talk about here today, and certainly at the conference in depth. But the idea of differentiating between things that people are suffering and calling them out by name is so important. It's hard to put words to the importance. Think of it like a medical doctor. You know, if I complain of a side ache and you're treating me for a pulled muscle, but it's cancer, because I'm describing a symptom, but you're not getting more in depth to what the full presentation is and my history and listening, we're going to have trouble. And I think that you know, we hear the number 22 a day. We believe it's a higher number for a number of reasons. You know, it doesn't count single vehicle accidents or suicide by cop or accidental overdose, you know, any of that. That it's a much higher. And why? What are we missing? And that's, I think, what puts you guys on the cutting edge of this. I know there are other entities that are working very hard to do that, but the fact that you're putting on this conference for other providers is huge.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna get started on our questions. And the first question is, can you share specific examples of how you have witnessed moral injury manifesting in the lives of veterans or service members? And how has this understanding shaped your therapeutic interventions or strategies?
Yes, I can share. I know when you and I have chatted about this, and your mission is for women veterans, because they seem to get a bit of short shrift, because their population is so much smaller in our armed services, but they're also a little later to the party in that official way, it seems. So I noticed different things with differences between the treatment of men and women. You know, with Operation Freedom Bird, there generally seems to be just a handful of, same thing with the residential treatment centers that I've worked in, just a handful of women versus men. So the way that men and women approach how they experience a trauma, how they articulate the trauma, it does fall a bit against gender lines, because how we are raised in our homes of origin, our family cultures, our you know, the male female dynamic, then you roll into what those edicts are in the armed forces. It does alter then how I'm going to process or not process my pain. So you know, one of the most common trauma that women face is sexual trauma in the military. The unspoken trauma at a high number is that men also experience sexual trauma, you know, military sexual trauma. And the manner in which it plays out, how one internalizes those behaviors, are obviously impacted, like all trauma, by the frequency, the duration, the intervention, who I am as I come into that moment, what was said, what was not said, you know, what action am I allowed to take or not take, what's expected of me, and who am I when I come home, active duty versus veteran. And that impacts the treatment as well. Am I done with my military service, or do I have to go right back into the very place of my pain and face those people? And I do, like many others, treat both. When we're dealing with that specific type of, and again, common, sadly, traumatic experience, we know with people who experience sexual trauma, regardless of whether you're a veteran, first responder, or a regular citizen. I was in my 30s when I was drugged and raped. And so I am a survivor of sexual trauma. And I think that the most common thing that we see is that we take on blame. Somehow I brought this on. I should have been able to prevent it. What's wrong with me? Am I damaged now? I think when men experience sexual trauma, male to male, does this alter who I am as a man? You know, women, if it's male to female, how will my significant other now going forward think of me? Who can I share this with? Am I supposed to be tough? Women walk into the military with this sort of extra load in their rucksack, which is don't you damn, oh, I'm sorry. I do swear. Is it bad if I swear?
No.
Oh, you guys. So I swear like
I think it's mostly adults listening to this. So.
Oh man, it is really hard. My first career was in construction, so I do swear like a truck driver. Now you work with you all, and it's like
You're fine.
F-bomb. All right, I'm going to work hard, everyone, but you're going to see when I struggle. But you know, if women are not allowed to shed a damn tear, please don't, because then the side, you know, chiding is, I knew it. You can't let those guys in here. You know, they can't handle it. And so now you are suffering something that is extraordinarily to the core of who you are as a human. You know, the most stripped away thing a person can take is, you know, your sexual integrity, your privacy, you know, all the things that you can name. And but then, you know, oftentimes it's a hierarchy. It's a supervisor. It's somebody who is of higher rank, and or it's the people, my brothers, who swore to protect me. They're doing it maybe as an initiation. Maybe they're doing it as a gang rape kind of an experience, or, you know, just all of the different things. And then I've got to go and serve right next to you on the battlefield or in the field hospital or whatever. And I'm supposed to, act like nothing happened, but also take a bullet for you. I mean, it just, the complexity of just that trauma is so grand that it takes a lot of unweaving. It takes a lot of time. I think in the treatment of all veterans, and I'll get to a different type of trauma that is also common in the military, which results in moral injury, but also just PTSD type trauma, is that what did I bring to the table previously? We know that people who will in later life have sexual trauma experiences very frequently, statistically, will have had sexual trauma in their early life, which is fascinating. And so is it, you know, some of the theory is that predators know prey, that there's something that an unresolved trauma in the sexual arena we give off in some way that leads to a subsequent. Now, that's not everyone. And I think in the military, that may be a lesser experience, because we see, again, you have this high propensity of, you know, a more aggressive type personality, somebody who is forward driven. What combat does alter in everyone, you know, as far as just that intensity drive, the offloading, the peer pressures, the 1,000 points of entry. But I always look for what is precipitating, always look for what is precipitating, because you can heal a sexual trauma from later in life and still have a total infection growing up underneath. And that's for men and women. I think that is a true statement for men and women. I did treat a gentleman who, Vietnam veteran, who was a LRP, long range reconnaissance patrol officer, soldier. And by the time I got him, and I did meet him in Operation Freedom Bird, which by the way, actually stopped. I think they were 35 years old when they stopped serving the Arizona combat vets. But wow, if you, that in and of itself is an amazing experience. But that's how I met him. And he, 70 years and change, elegant man, very spiritually inclined, a Catholic gentleman who church every day, all of that. And his moral injury versus PTSD, he did have PTSD, but he actually had symptom resolution with the treatment he got from the VA, but they didn't treat the moral injury piece. So in a private setting, what he shared was that with great pain, that they were directed not to engage the enemy, the Viet Cong. But sometimes, you know, as they're out scoping, you know, looking recon to bring information back, but sometimes the enemy would be there and they would engage. At that time, the Viet Cong was mutilating the bodies of our service members when they were in combat moments with them, cutting off body parts, doing all kinds of horrifying things. And our guys would come up upon those bodies and see that. So when there was hand-to-hand combat with the LERP group patrol, they would repay that out of their rage. They would repay and mutilate bodies back. And this gentleman disclosed that he and his guys, they would cut the ears off of the deceased Viet Cong, and they would wear them as a necklace, strings of ears. And, you know, his pain is who does that? What kind of a person does that? You know, and the tears and the sobbing and the horrifying shame. I mean, he wouldn't hurt anything, yet here we are. And I think to treat all kinds of trauma, but certainly of the moral injury flavor, where a person does have some sort of connection to the action. I did something that I violated my own moral code versus, you know, people who I serve with violating toward me. There are two types. You have to be able to listen to that and receive it in such a way that as the clinician, you have to deal with both ends of it. How does he make sense of why he would do that? Because that's a legitimate question. We always ask, why did I do this? Why? Well, the antidote to that is answer the question. Why did you do that? And oftentimes in the treatment of moral injury and other things, the person does have the answer to the question about why they did it. And he was able to spell out, you know, what it was like to be there in that. I think a vast majority of us can put ourselves in a position of having been so utterly wronged, or a family member or a loved one so wrong that you want retribution, you want revenge. And when the moment is over, you think, I'm not wired like that. You know, heat of moments, they matter. Now you move backwards into sexual trauma. And I believe that people who commit those crimes, some people will have a moral code and a conscience that years later, or hopefully soon, they think those things themselves. Oh my God, who would do that in a gang rape type moment or a peer pressured moment or a whatever? But some people don't. They feel justified. And that is really the difference between where we as clinicians are working. This particular gentleman, he walks both. I can put myself in his position as an 18, 19, 20-year-old man who has been drafted into this horrifying moment. And I don't know what I'm doing. They don't know what we're doing. And we're seeing our other brothers who were also not wanting to be here, you know, and I've got to go home and talk to their family. I could put myself in that position of justification, yet it is unjustifiable. So it's a complex treatment, and you have to be able to be there in that moment with the person to walk through that sort of circuitous route to healing. And ultimately, in any of these situations, whether it's PTSD, moral injury, unresolved grief, loss, what the brain is looking for is an action. What do I do now? And you have to be very clever about that. And they do need a something. In certain faith-based systems, there are prescribed things to do, but you know, we are hungry for justice against others, and we are hungry for some sort of penance in our own selves. And you have to be comfortable in sitting in someone else's shame to be able to kind of prescribe an action that he can take. And I've got other examples. I can go on with this question probably for the rest of the hour.
Sure.
But you get the idea. I'm going to grab a tissue because I've got a fan blowing in my face.
Yeah, you're good.
Nose runs. Go ahead.
I wrote down, to me, that was so powerful. The antidote is to face the question. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you said, but
to answer the question of why did it happen to me? Why did I do it to another? Answer the question.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so thank you for that. Now, as a therapist specializing in trauma, what are some of the key insights or lessons you have learned about the unique impact of moral injury on mental health and well-being? And do you see a difference from other forms of trauma?
Oh goodness, yes. I think that like other trauma, can be cumulative, and it is notable that one event can result in post-traumatic stress disorder. It can result in moral injury. It can result in, catastrophic grief and unresolved, looping grief for years. One event can be all three of those things. One event can be two, any combination of, and I call it the dark triad. So I needed to come up with something, with the residential treatment center where I could try to get the guys to understand these are the most common things you're going to probably deal with: law enforcement, EMS, ER doc, anyone in the military who's for sure deployed and gone out in enemy territory. MASH units, just anybody in that place. And to understand what symptom you have to listen. I'm not the one that coined this, but 2 and 1, use them in that proportion. You have to listen to the person in front of you. I think that people in my line of work, we tend to like a modality or two, and then we shove everybody into that modality and we try to make it fit. You, as a clinician, I believe, if you're going to do trauma work, you need to understand the different flavors of trauma. For some people, it is, years ago being bullied on the playground, which could be quite horrible. It could be not being, watching your parents argue, witnessing, not actually being the victim, technically. It can be where PTSD, by definition, that's a victim-based experience, fear-based. Moral injury is shame, guilt-based. Now, there's a little bit of, with the LERP, it is pretty horrifying to see what he saw. So now he may have PTSD out of the fear that they're going to come for me out of the jungle, or now that I've done this, that there is some fear there. So there may be some shades of. And we have so many wonderful modalities for PTSD resolution. My preferred one is EMDR, but it isn't for everyone. So I have other tricks in my kit, as everyone should. Moral injury, it really goes to your soul, the core of things, your spiritual self. And I don't mean religious self, which could appear, but I do mean your spiritual self, the essence of who you are. If it's done to you, or you do or don't do something that is part of your sworn code. I think that in what makes the military experience of any of those unique is the propensity for experience. I mean, my goodness, it's the worst thing in the world. One experience that a person has in the military is the worst thing in a lifetime experience for most civilians. And it's just Thursday for you, out there. And so you've got to untie that knot. But the idea that my job is about right and wrong. My whole job is about code, about, higher level directives and hierarchy and following orders and yes and no. And even to a higher degree, if I break that law, I don't get to quit the military and because I don't want to play anymore. I go to the brig. I mean, I don't even own me anymore. It's so that when you are betrayed by your own in the military, by a command, by your peers, by people who are also raising their hand for that oath, it goes so deep. And then you can't, where do you go with it? The very place where you have as an option to go, military court, sometimes not supportive. I know in recent times, more supportive. So the layers of betrayal is the key phrase here. I was betrayed or I betrayed. Two sides of the moral injury coin, run deep. And we still have to answer for the why and also the do. What action do I take? And I believe that at the end of all of these things, whether it is PTSD, moral injury, and grief, you are moving eventually to acceptance that it happened and forgiveness, release, or reconciliation. And so the more versed you are in all of these stages, but we've got to get to, I use this phrase frequently, let's lift 40,000 feet above what happened. Let's look at all of the components, not just what you're perseverating on, not just what you're fixated on. What is looping for you? What is your narrative? We have clinicians, again, who subscribe to a modality or two and specialize in it. They may not really be fully listening to what that person, you versus him, her, you have to really know who you're treating in order to treat. You can't just make a person fit, and that is very important.
Absolutely. Dan, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, so as we think about from a chaplaincy perspective, we're used to in a normal soldier contact, soldier engagement contact, we're used to 1 or 2 sessions with a person. Most of the time, they're looking for some help at the moment, and you can give them some ideas. You can help them do some problem solving or work through what they're thinking about. And you may not see them again, or for that same problem. But what I talk to chaplains about when you're talking about moral injury, be prepared for a long, relationship with this person and many sessions potentially, because as you talked about, like, we're getting really deep here, and one counseling session with a closing prayer, that's not going to do it. Even, and I agree with you, giving them things to do, and I say daily, it's about rewiring their whole thought process.
Mhm.
And you have a short-term decision, like you're talking about the LERP guy, that now has long-term repercussions and ramifications, but that too can be rewired, that too can be forgiven, that too, you really can get to a place where it's okay, where you can able to let yourself off the hook, able to forgive yourself. But part of that is a daily sort of walk through that, I love daily affirmations and those kind of things, meditations, prayers, whatever your flavor, whatever your word is you like. But this is not going to be for a chaplain, and for counselors like yourself, you're probably used to many sessions, but for chaplains, it's like, hey, this is not, let's have 1, 2, 3 sessions are going to be good, move on to the next soldier. This is where, if you want to be part of that care team, be prepared for many sessions of helping them through, and you should love that. Like, I love that, being able to have a soldier that engages, I'm seeing every week or every 2 weeks, whatever it is, and seeing them grow through that, and work through that, and seeing a different, because moral injury often affects people's self-esteem on a really, it can shatter someone's self-esteem, their identity, and you talked about that, they don't know who they are now or what they are. Am I really that evil person? No, you may have done an evil thing, but you're not an evil person. Help people walk through that. But just the understanding, if I'm going to be a moral injury care provider, I'm in it for the long haul with you. We're going to journey together. You may not be able to have 100 clients, right? You may just be able to have a few that you're spending lots and lots of hours with. Because when you're not with them, they have to work through that. And like you said, giving them things to do, to think about mantras, whatever it is from your angle, is super helpful, but they're still going to need somebody to come back in to be able to visit and say, hey, I'm really struggling right now. I need an outside voice, so to speak. So that's kind of what goes through my head as I hear you talk about that work.
Thanks, Dan. So in preparation for our podcast today, Annette and I had talked, and she had made me aware of a new book that's come out called Love Mom. and it's inspiring stories celebrating motherhood. And they're different chapters written by different women who are mothers. And I honed in on Annette's chapter. Obviously, I was keen to get, more of your story and understand where you're coming from even better. And I think what really stood out to me is the bravery that you demonstrated in writing as a gold star mother, having lost your son in 2009. And so I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing, how that has played into your work with veterans, with your status as a gold star mother, and how has your awareness of both of those aspects influenced your approach in supporting individuals who have experienced trauma and combat related challenges and their families, frankly?
Yeah. I initially, because I was already a clinician when this happened, specializing in trauma, and the way that Adam, when he came home, he was different, but he was also so young, we also know the brain is growing still, and it's being bathed in all this pain. So I had a level of understanding. When I rewind the tape to the things that he would say, only when intoxicated, he wouldn't talk about his combat trauma when sober. My uncle Al, who was a B-52 ball turret gunner in World War II, he said it best when we would inquire about the war. He would say, I'm not going to tell you those things because I went so that you would never have to know those things. So if I tell you, you're now going to know, and therefore you will be there. And I thought, oh, gosh, I do get that. And I know that that is part of where I think a lot of our veterans are, my son included. But it has to come out, and I would try to encourage those things. When I rewind the tape about the things that he would say while intoxicated, the defense is down. I can see now the difference between the moral injury and the PTSD, of which he had both. He came out of the military with a diagnosis of PTSD. And I could also see that the early life events, so it informed all of that. For me personally, I thought, who will want to be treated by me? I couldn't save my own son. Now, over the course of time, I've actually had 2 people say that to me. So I was glad that I got to that first. Yeah, it was hard to hear. One was really angry because her husband was going into sobriety and she didn't want to go into sobriety. So she made that about me somehow. So I thought, okay, whatever, girlfriend. But yeah, but the point is still there, that the thought is there. And so the grace of God, the sheer grace is that I have an also awareness that I wouldn't even be invited to some of these tables in the veteran community if I hadn't had this experience, if my son was alive. There are a lot of people that do what I do for a living, but there's an sort of a supposed given belief in my understanding of how bad this can be. In treating veterans and first responders selfishly, hearing the horrifying things that go through their mind actually oddly helped me to understand why my son is not here. That the collision of events is it's a 75, 85, 95% of the time what is leading a person into suicide. It's a sensation of trapped. So in the teaching in large groups, I speak around the country to law enforcement veterans, in training mode, to understand that with each other, you need to be aware if clusters of events are happening. We all can handle things if they happen here and there and there and there. But if I have a flat tire, an argument with my spouse, I'm having, I'm in the month of all those bad things that happened to me, my unresolved grief, my worst pain. I got in an argument with the boss. When you carry this level of pain, PTSD, moral injury, and unresolved grief, you're never at a resting point of sort of just being casual and easygoing. You're always at sort of an activated, animated up here. So it doesn't take much to put you into trapped. And suicide is not a selfish act. I really have a hard time when people believe that. I know that people listening, some people are going to think differently than I do, and that's okay. I'm right and you're not. So there's that. Because people, honestly, when you listen to people who have come close to suicide, and then for whatever reason it doesn't complete, and then they're in your room talking to you, they're not thinking of you. They're not thinking. And if they are, what they're thinking, most likely, frequently, I should say, is you would be better off without me. I'm a burden to you. If you really knew what I have done, if you knew me, if you knew how much I've changed, like it goes on and on and on. Shame, shame, shame. PTSD, when you do the research, moral injury and shame are at the root of suicidal thoughts, gestures, actions, far more than the fear-based PTSD, I'm afraid moments. We're missing it. So when your clients are talking to you, what I learned is listen to differentiate between what is being said, what is not being said, and kind of in your own little put it, start to break it down and then help the client to break it down. This is that, and this is this. Have you ever heard of this before? I mean, we have priests and we have confessional booths. That's moral injury, right? We go and we sit behind the curtain because my shame causes me to not want to look at your face. It's not new. It's not new. But as a term it is. And again, secondary gain is another thing that I was informed, that informed me. What do you get out of remaining stuck and needing this penance, needing it to not want to be off the hook? Because if I get off the hook, then it'll mean that what I did was okay. It'll never mean that, but it'll mean that the circumstances were such that I did or didn't do something. And I have to reconcile who I was in that moment, and that those things are the recipe for that moment, that's not my true character. The harder ones are when there's an attempt to justify. Working with the Gold Star community, I became part of the Gold Star family. I host it's a national event at the end of fall every year, all over the United States. And so the second year since Adam died in 2009, 2010, I offered to have it hosted in my backyard. And it was selfish. My son died October 24th. His funeral was Halloween, and this event is usually then. And I thought, gosh, if I host this, I have to remain hinged. I can't spin off out into nowhere. And but what I got, this makes me want to cry, the look on people's faces, the grab for responsibility for my loved one being gone, whether it ended because of combat. So a Gold Star family is the person that has deployed, or it was enlisted, but deployed, died in war or because of war. So we have Vietnam vets that die months, years, decades later of Agent Orange. That's a because of war. Moral injury and PTSD are physiological injuries because the chronic looping creates neurological changes. I think, Dan, you said that earlier. It is a rewiring. It can be changed and it can be put back. But listening to the families, the pain, sometimes it's called carried pain. Even the children carry it. And I love photography, so I'm the photographer at the event as well. And when I'm going through the photos and I make a DVD for the families after, I can see it. I can see it. The hollow stare, all of it. And I can see, yeah. So the tenderness and the camaraderie, the words that you don't have to speak, the I get it portion of it. But in treating veterans and first responders and the treatment of them, I think you have to be really willing to get in the weeds, and you have to be able to hear pretty horrible things, and you have to be able to go in the pain. It's not comfortable. And shame is the thing that most of us don't want to hear from somebody else. We try to cover it. I hear clinicians doing it because I train clinicians to work obviously with and I can hear where they're starting to do this because it feels uncomfortable to sit in somebody else's bad behavior. It's easier when you realize, say, such as in sexual trauma, you didn't bring this onto yourself, but this attempt power grab to get control of, I somehow should have prevented it kind of a thought, that's easier. But when there is ownership, partially, you have to work through that.
Yeah.
Dan?
What you were talking about earlier, and one of the reasons why PTSD treatments may not work for moral injury in the same way is because it's a spiritual thing. It's not a religious thing necessarily, but it's a spiritual thing. When you talk about things like forgiveness, as you're talking about these various elements and letting off the hook and being able, like you said, if I forgive myself, if I'm able to put this behind me, let go of it, then does that mean what I did was okay? I mean, those are spiritual kind of conversations, and a pill is not going to do that. It's not going to fix that, right?
Well, let me just say, a pill's not going to do for any treatment.
Yeah.
This is a terrible thing to say. People will put out, you can't open your car door without hitting some veteran organization with doing something collective. Yes, there's something beneficial about doing things with people that also served.
Sure.
But in a swimming with dolphins isn't going to cure PTSD. It's not going to cure moral injury. The collective sitting around together, talking together, that's going to have an impact. But I will say that with EMDR, I do use EMDR to work on moral injury, because what we're hunting for is the core belief. That's a core tenet of EMDR. You're looking for the physiological sensations, the images, all of that. Well, that's all present in moral injury. But if the thing I think is about me, which is generally what a core belief is, I can use that. And what EMDR does is that I shut up and you shut up, and we let the healing start to occur through the emotional networks, which are not really necessarily what gets the airtime. Talk therapy is a matter of my logic engages with your logic. And then, boy, I better have the right words, and you better be able to think of the right words to say back. But that's not where trauma lives. It lives at deeper soul level.
Right.
So I do think it's a spiritual thing, but I do think that some modalities do lend themselves. Another one that I'm a huge fan of is internal family systems, IFS, and it marries very well with EMDR. But people will say things, especially with moral injury. Let's just go back to the Vietnam LRP. A part of me understands why I would do that when we finally get to the why, answering the why. And he describes the circumstance. And a part of me is horrified by that behavior because I would never, but yet I did. A part of me feels betrayed by my country because I was put in that position. A part of me is angry with the Viet Cong, and I hate them, but yet I know that they're just trying to defend their country. So I even feel some weird compassion for them. Like, you've got all these parts that are all arguing internally. That is fair game for the full-on modality of internal family systems, but it does marry well with EMDR processes. And then the actions of prayer, forgiveness, and I think having a clear definition with your clients, patients, of what forgiveness means to you versus what it means to me is a necessary step.
Right. And I think that one of the reasons why there's no such thing as a modality that works for everybody is because we are so unique. And, one of the clients I had, she would never have done group anything. Like, she just would never, she may, with enough individual counseling, get to a place where she might be in a group. But she would never do that. And so, that's a modality, like peer support has worked for a lot of folks. Not her. She just, because of early trauma, early child, and her need to be fiercely independent. And then the shame that was so powerful. She would never openly share that with others, and so and then I've heard, other folks like with EMDR, it just couldn't. So my point of that is that the need for lots of different modalities, to not camp on one or two. And I
Right.
think part of the issue that we tend to have with major organizations like the VA is there's going to be a certain number of approved modalities, and that's the ones you get to use. And if you have a client that doesn't work for, well, you just can't help them. And
No,
so
and that,
where the
yeah.
community piece, the nonprofits, all the different state organizations, federal organizations, that's where there's a need for community partnerships and working together, because maybe we can't do certain modalities because we don't have funding for it or authorization, whatever, but you do, and you can, and you've had great success. So let me help get you a client. Let me, refer this client here. And we have too many, and I don't want to get too far down this road, but just there are too many barriers at times for organizations to be able to work together, and rather than sort of like, hey, these are the modalities we do, and if that doesn't work for you, we can't help you.
Yeah,
So.
I absolutely agree. One of the other things I think that as you're speaking, it reminded me to say that, when you're working with veterans and first responders, and I do lump them together because the traumas are the propensity for, and oftentimes one career goes right into the other and then they go back. So you usually see the same person in both. It's a high number in certain
Sure.
communities, but I do put them together. But it was part of the reason why we chose with this treatment center to not do certain things, because the feedback from the veteran is that I don't want it. I didn't like it. It doesn't work. Some of these modalities, my strong way of doing therapy is I don't want to clean a room. I don't want to clean a room. I want to clean the house. Now, if we're here to work on your car accident, that's a room. That's a 1T, big T trauma. It's not, lots of feeder traumas or sustained traumatic events, all of that. But I always start from birth, because the foundation of who a person is affects how they perceive anything subsequent to that foundation. It's like building a house. My walls are going to only sit plumb if the foundation is sound. And so you have to know the person, to my opinion, all the way down to the bottom. I think to your point with the VA, they were inclined to do two modalities that I've yet to really hear a house cleaning, which is what I'm looking for. They did adopt EMDR finally, which I'm very happy about. But I also want to say that two things. One is that if you're going to venture into this realm, you must do evidence-based treatment. Do not venture into these early development, one-off, zany things. You will hurt the people in front of you, and they may not ever go back to a clinician again. Do not do that. You must be well-versed. You need to practice and, be well-trained. You need resource development. To your point, Dan, you open up this can of worms, and if that person cannot contain that pain when you send them out that door, you have harmed your patient. You have to do resource development before any of these things can be done, because you're wading into deep territory. And so I love group therapy, even for people who don't want to be in the group, but to be in there as a listener. There are a lot of things that we get from listening to others share their pain, especially sexual trauma. Interestingly, it's one of the benefits in all the domains. Women will share it. They will share it. And it helps the men in the room share theirs. There's a statistic out there. How many women do you think 0 to 18 have sexual trauma? What percentage of women? 0 to 18. 80% is the statistic. What do you think it is for men?
60.
70. So I need you to think about that. And we had a lot of sexual trauma in Vietnam and pre-women being in the military. They had lots of so the VA is learning to ask about sexual trauma with men. And who do you think is never going to want to talk about it? And it has to be talked about. It is such a core violation of everything sacred to a human. And it just, the other thing I think is interesting with moral injury is that I also have a bone to pick with my higher power. The very area of my spiritual self is also injured. So when I go to a spiritual place to have my moral injury looked at, I don't know if I want to believe in a God that would allow that. And so I've got to work through all of that, the injury to even just praying or forgiving. It's so complex.
Sure.
It's not as complex, I think, as what I'm trying to make it sound, but it is that complex, because we are. You're
Absolutely.
also working with very educated human beings. We are an educated military, very educated. And so I think some of these silly modalities that are out there, silly things that people do, especially in residential treatment centers, I struggle with some of that. And it needs to not occur because it's insulting to who is in front of you, especially when you're moving into special forces and all of that. You better be on your, smart people.
Yeah.
Really smart people.
Okay, so we have time for one more big question, and I do want to focus. I mean, we need to talk about the hard stuff for sure, but I would also love to hear of a success story that you've had or a transformative experience where you were able to maybe help somebody navigate their moral injury and regain a sense of purpose and well-being.
Yeah, thank you for that question, because we do tend to focus on the other stuff and not ever say, well, gee, does anything work? I would say, I was a success story with EMDR. I carried PTSD, but I also carried moral injury. And so with my clinician, and I was not a service member, I have what is called post-traumatic growth. That's a well-documented phenomenon. At the residential treatment center, there was a gentleman who was a drone pilot. Well, he worked in the drone with the other people in that area. He was not the one that actually fired the drone, but he was bringing intelligence back and forth from one room to another and all of that. And when you are a drone, when you're in the drone unit, you see very up close and personal the damage because you're looking straight at it with cameras. And so, and this was in Iraq, he comes to the treatment center with high suicidality, several attempts. He has a family, little kids, wife, and he was under eye-to-eye suicide watch. We had to keep him under constant 24-hour surveillance because he was that fragile. So we do a 2-hour presentation. I do a 2-hour presentation at that moment. And then we do a breakout where the clients are to do this exercise, which actually I'm not going to share what the exercise is because you now have to go to the conference in order to hear this.
Right. Teaser.
It really is so good. It is so good. I didn't develop it, but I certainly altered it. So it's kind of an adaptation, but it is somebody else's brainchild. Anyway, so I have everybody break into groups, 2 people. My husband, who is a 30-year combat vet, was in the room because he was just happened to be there traveling. And I asked him, if I knew that this man was so fragile. So I sat and listened to his moral injury. And then for the second part of the exercise, I asked my husband, would he please sit with him? And then he knows the exercise. So he kind of finished and walked it through. Exercise was done. Things go well. He's able to achieve this shift in his perspective, which is ultimately what we're looking for, a different way of viewing it. And again, I don't have any social media, literally zero. And I got a memo from the owner of the treatment center, and she said that this guy posted on their website or their Facebook page. It's been 20 days in 9 years that I have not been suicidal. And he cites this exercise. and he has a picture of him with his children. He looks different. There is
Mhm.
something about when a person makes that shift. It's almost like the flu that's been invading every cell of their system has been relieved. Color is different, countenance is different. With the LERP, same kind of a thing. He was able to move into grief. He was able to move through to forgiveness of others and self. Not that it was okay, and it's not necessarily an off the hook. We for another veteran who they would run over dogs in Iraq, out of a sense of revenge. There are wild dogs everywhere. But this man is a dog lover. And so I have him in my office, and he is so horrified. He's been suicidal in just the idea that he can't even, who would do that? And it was just a point of rage. There was a betrayal with the little community that they were set to protect. And one of their guys was blown up by a suicide bomber, a vest. He walked up with a suicide vest and exploded himself, killing the guy. Anyway, so his penance, his due, after we worked through, again, the forgiveness and everything else, he wanted to take an action. So he, again, a lot of going back and forth, which is you're going to go to a local pound, Humane Society, and he rescues dogs 1 to 3. He trains them for mobility issues, PTSD, and all of that, for veterans, hearing issues, all of that. And then he donates them to the veteran or first responder. And that is his penance, because he can't bring those dogs back, but he needs to save a veteran and he needs to save a dog. And so that is his due. So to be clever, and he there's no stopping him. No stopping him. I can go on and on and on. And there you will meet a woman, the one that you referred to, and we'll go more in depth into her story and the why we did this exercise, but she will speak on her own behalf and I'll chime in. But yeah, there are some good things out there.
Absolutely. And you're referring to Dr. Sarah Archer, who's going to be another one of our keynote speakers at the conference. And you two amazing ladies have been collaborating for the better part of a year on your presentation. So we're really looking forward to that. On that note, and here's your final question. What are you most looking forward to regarding your participation as a keynote and the networking opportunities that will be happening at the Comprehensive Moral Injury Conference this September?
Well, I'm looking forward to unfolding all of these topics. That is for sure. I mean, I am chomping at the bit. I'm like, how much time do I have? Like, I'm excited to get in the weeds. I love that. I'm excited to be in person and to have no interruption for several days about these subjects, about being with other providers. And I have a hard rule. I don't ever ask another provider to do something that I haven't tried myself. I ask no other patient to do anything I haven't done myself. So I'm interested in learning what other people have done that has worked. And I'm interested in providing ideas of things that have worked with this population specifically. I'm interested in sitting in on all these other categories, the not keynote people, but their presentations. I mean, in just the planning time, all of these other ideas, all the research about the gut and the brain, and alter one, alter the other, huge stuff. I mean, there's so many people that have all these other ideas. We're inviting people. We're conspiring to invite people to join Dan in some of his stuff, who've written amazing books, and then to be able to hear more than even a book offers, to be able to make personal examples is a huge thing you'll never forget. To be able to attend this again with the CEUs you'll be providing, to be able to I can't capture all that. I'm just excited to be the hell out of Arizona. September is fatiguing here. Got a retreat.
Yeah. Dan, any kind of closing thoughts before I wrap this up for today? This has been awesome, Annette. And I do want to say really quick, the first time we met you and we got off the call with you, I called Dan and I was like, I love her energy. We need her to be a part of this. And so I just want to say thank you for agreeing to serve as a keynote, for participating in so many of our conference event planning things to make it even better. And your input has been incredibly valuable. And then for today and your willingness to share more of your story and help us build anticipation for the conference. Thank you so much. So Dan?
Yeah, I am really looking forward to seeing you at the conference and having some really long conversations over coffee or eggs or whatever. I like beer.
Not
So
beer, it's vodka. Just kidding. It's
yeah,
water.
but yeah, having some really long conversations about all these kind of things and then watching you during your talk, because we gave you lots of time, and we want to, I know a lot of people there will really want to engage you and have questions and all that. And so I'm really looking forward to the really deep discussions we're going to have. And part of the reason why in the conference we built in personal time, you go to these conferences and you're completely exhausted by the end of it. And you go from one thing to the other, one session to the other. And I think at the end of it, you're still going to be tired just from all the information you input. But we built in personal time each day for people to be able to get together, to be able to get with presenters, to be able to hang out, have that cup of coffee or wine or whatever it is, right? And really have some conversations that there's not time to have during a presentation, or tell stories or share with people. They're people that come in person, because this is a Jesuit retreat center. They have their own little room and their own little sanctuary, and there are little quiet rooms around the facility, because we'll have the entire facility. So there'll be times where people might want to just go get a quiet room and really, take this in, do some meditation or whatever that they want to do. This podcast has been so rich with discussion. Just think, if you're there 3-4 days with Annette, the kind of great discussions you can have, and with Jamie and with myself and Sarah and Dr. Dubé, all these great folks, be ashamed to miss it for sure. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Yeah. And the terrain, the pictures that you've sent of this retreat. Oh my gosh. How can we, and I'm hoping for fall color secretly, because we don't have such things here.
Yeah.
No. Yeah,
So,
the ability not just to go to like a quiet room, but to go walk in nature, and it's very peaceful. It's not in the middle of downtown or by an airport or anything like that. So part of the reason I love that is, the people that we're inviting do expend a lot of energy doing heavy stuff most of the year. And so just to give them these little brief moments of solitude or connecting with nature, or just talking with people that really get it in person over meals and things like that is going to be really extra.
Tough cases. Like if you've got a tough case, bring a tough case where you feel stuck. Like let us all conspire.
Absolutely.
I think that was fabulous.
I love that.
A joy.
We can workshop it on site. Yeah, that's really good.
Exactly.
Okay, so that concludes our podcast for today. All the information about the conference and our agenda and everything will be listed under, within the podcast summary. Again, Annette, can't thank you enough for all of it, every bit of what you've brought to this effort, and especially for your willingness to share today with us. So thanks again. And we say thank you to our listeners, and please like and share this podcast with people that you think would be interested. And that's all we've got for today. Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.